I think that's it. Sorry for the delay. Well, happy Sunday, everybody. Tonight, I thought that of all the good things that we could talk about, I think that some of what practitioners or aspiring practitioners need is they need to understand what it is that we need to meet the instructions of meditation with in our life so that they can take hold of us and begin to do something. We have no shortage of instructions, of meditation instructions. Hello, Lori. We have no shortage of retreats that we can go to. In fact, meditation is very well represented in our world at this point. We have a lot of good instruction, not just mediocre instruction. It basically took a while for teachers to decide what we should be learning. And we're still sorting out all of the things that were begun in the 1970s and then tweaked in the 1980s and then tweaked again in the 1990s. And all three of those versions of meditation have been coexisting. And if we hear of some path that was first taught in 1971 by an Indian or Tibetan or Japanese or Thai teacher that came to the West, met us, and taught us, we may have been given something which on review, those teachers, most of whom aren't alive anymore, would think, that's not the best way to teach them. So even though the Dharma, the teachings that support meditation, and even though the methods, the way of attaining the fruition of meditation, they're all rooted in something that has been essentially consistent for 2,500 years. So the Dharma, in some sense, doesn't change, and any Dharma that we find relatable is going to help us. But the approach that we have to take if we want these practices and teachings to really come to fruition in our life has to be responsive to the world that we live in. So the teachings themselves might be the same as someone was receiving 200 years ago or 800 years ago, and the methods, the actual meditation methods, might be the same as people throughout history have practiced. But there are other factors that are so important that if they're not put in place, it's very possible that the practice and the teachings themselves will have a hard time making a dent in our life. And then what you find are people who tried meditation for a little while and it didn't do anything for them, so they leave it aside, but then they also tell other people, I tried meditation. You can try meditation, but it didn't really do much for me. And this is a situation that we need to be careful about that, because if something as beneficial as the authentic meditation teachings came into our life and we didn't do it in a way where it even could work, that's on us. That's not on the teaching. So if we share our outcome with someone, we would have to say, look, I didn't really know how to do it. Maybe it works as advertised. Maybe the traditions are authentic, but I didn't really put very much into it. We would need that type of honesty. But often meditation is like a phase that someone goes through. And so let's just think about how people begin meditation in our world, not in Nepal, not in Tibet, not in Japan, not in any place that has a strong representation of people who've been meditating for a long time. So we hear about meditation. We might hear that meditation is connected to a tradition of something called enlightenment. And then we have that also. We've heard about meditation, and we've heard about an extraordinary goal of meditation, which we probably have never really heard of before. And if we have heard about it, it's unlikely that we've heard about it in depth to understand what it means. But it's just as likely that we only heard about meditation. We didn't hear about any of the enriching knowledge that has always coexisted with meditation. So what essentially we hear about is a technique. And what's that technique? Usually following the breath. Maybe you close your eyes and you follow the breath. Without any context for that practice, what on earth are we expecting that to do? Well, what would we expect it to do? It seems reasonable that it would embody us because we're following the breath. It would relax us because this is both embodying and calming. And if we do enough of it, it may kind of rewire us a little bit, not a ton. So we have better concentration. Maybe we have a better understanding. TM. That was actually my introduction too, a long time ago. We end up with some mixture of an old technique and our individual assumptions of what that technique is for. The more we learn about the history, not really like the year-by-year history, but the more we learn about, maybe I should say the culture or the tradition of meditators, the more we understand that any person who's starting meditation, in the early part of their training, the first 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, they don't yet have the ability to understand what meditation is doing for them. They don't yet have the capacity to understand where meditation is headed. And that's been the same for everyone, all these generations. There is one way that circumvents that, which is that you spend many years studying the philosophy of meditation so that you really understand everything that happens through meditation, how we unfold what this notion of enlightenment really means. You get all of that well understood, and then you begin the practice of meditation. That is rare, but there are traditions. The Gelug tradition of Tibet, the Dalai Lama is the head of the Gelug tradition, and one of their specialties is front-loading all the knowledge that someone would need, possibly well before they're ever given actual meditation techniques. That doesn't exist in our world unless we really pursue it. We find some Gelugpa group and then we study for many years. But I haven't really seen that solve the problem. So what's the problem? The problem is that people don't have an important component that makes meditation work. It's kind of like if you are planting a garden right now. It's late spring, early summer, and you go and you get your cuttings of tomatoes and zucchini and jalapenos, and you want to put them in the ground, but you kind of need to make sure that it's good ground, it has enough aeration in it, it has enough nutrition in it. You're going to have to monitor the moisture of it. You're going to have to protect it from rabbits and bugs and that kind of thing. And then if things go well, the plant will take and it will begin to grow. But it's not going to yield fruit right away. It's going to take time. It's going to have to go through its seasonal changes. And then maybe sometime around August or September, we're going to start seeing the peppers, the zucchini, the tomatoes, but not before then. We're going to have to spend time nourishing, staking, pruning, caring for the plants because we want them to yield tomatoes, peppers, zucchini. And they won't if they don't have the protection that they need. So people spend a lot of time taking care of their garden, months and months. Sometimes the first part of the year is just spent taking care of the soil and the garden beds so that these plants can grow and produce food. But it doesn't just happen right away. It happens in a natural progression. And of course, meditation is that way too. Meditation is a very different thing than our mind is used to doing. The meditation that we're talking about here is the traditional meditation that produces very specific changes in a human being. People can call anything they want meditation, but that doesn't mean that whatever they're doing is going to cause these results to happen. In fact, it's unlikely. It's unlikely that someone would stumble on this very carefully woven, this very carefully constructed path to the result of awakening. That isn't something that many people are just going to find on their own. That's why the path has survived all this time. That's why people have praised it and celebrated it and protected it for more than 2,000 years. It's something that's difficult to understand. It requires discipline to put in place, but once it gets going, it proves itself. And when it does prove itself, when you begin to have the preliminary insights into the nature of things, you'll never stop practicing from that point on. You'll never question the validity of meditation. But you could easily question the validity of meditation in the first year or 2 years if you think that something is supposed to happen then. So, why don't we know that? Why don't we have any sense of what these practices are? Why do we have such an enormous attrition in our culture of people who think for a long time about, maybe I'll start meditation, but then they do, and they'll tell you, it was so boring. Or they'll say, I just couldn't stop thinking. And they'll say all the things that only show that they didn't have any idea of what they were doing. I was thinking about a video that I wanted to make a while back, and a lot of the advice you get from people who make videos is you gotta, and maybe this advice works well, maybe this is just too run-of-the-mill, but you come up with questions and you put those in the thumbnail or in the title, such as the number one reason why your meditation isn't working. So I was thinking about that, like, okay, what would I answer? I mean, it's a pretty obvious one to me. The number one reason that your meditation isn't working is because you don't know how to meditate. The number one reason that your meditation is working is that you don't know how to do it. You don't know what it is. You don't know what to do. So Dharma teachers, people like me in the West, we're in the business of teaching meditators who are new to meditation. Of course, that's a lot of fun to sort of introduce people to all of this for the first time. But we're also in the business of kind of receiving people who've been doing it for years and years with no results. And so I'd say half of my career has been spending time with people who have been perhaps meditating longer than I have. But nothing has happened. They don't want to give it up. It was an original inspiration at one point in their life. They want to keep going with it. They really have a lot of trust in it, but it's not working for them. So I have to diagnose the situation. Like, if you've been meditating for 30 years and nothing is happening, what are you not doing that you should be doing, or what are you doing that you shouldn't be doing? Because it's in there somewhere. You're not doing what you should be doing. And you might be doing something that veers you away from meditation, from the real path. So, my notes. I think it needs to be said, even if anyone who watches this has heard this many times, that meditation is a technique in service of a body of knowledge that has to be in place for meditation to work. If we only think of meditation as calming down or stabilizing our mind, well, then what I just said doesn't apply. But if we only think of it as calming down or stabilizing our mind, we have to understand that the bulk of history of meditation hasn't really had much to do with those two things. If we think that's what meditation is for, we're making ourselves settle for something very small when we could have something very big. Meditation is not just a practice of calming down. It has been pitched that way in our culture, but we know why that is, right? It's an easier thing to sell. It's an easier thing to tell a bunch of people who don't know anything about meditation to begin with that here is this new thing you can do, and it will give you these results that you want, that you already know that you want. And all you have to do is, get an app and meditate 5 minutes a day, and you'll get that. And I'm very suspicious about whether any of that stuff actually works. But certainly, that's not what great meditation teachers who make the journey from the East and set up communities here and teach them and guide them and that kind of thing. They're not trying to just create communities of people who are calm. That's not what meditation is for. So meditation is the method we use to guide ourselves along a new understanding of the very world we're living in. It's an understanding that none of us have had previously. And this understanding comes in what is called the Dharma. The Dharma is the vision or the understanding that a fully meditated mind sees. So meditation in this sense clarifies, strengthens, sharpens, enriches our capacity to understand the world we're living in. And we come to a preliminary state of accurately seeing what the world is, what life is, what death is, what consciousness is. And in order to take that vision and turn it into experience, we meditate. Meditation is part of that, but without the knowledge, without the context of it, meditation is it's a small tool for a small result. The Dharma is the teaching that allows the mind to transform itself. So Dharma doesn't come in and act on us like a magic potion. Dharma extends to us like a path or like a ladder that we can climb. We have to go on the journey. We have to use our energy. We have to use our determination to do this. But Dharma is a pathway to go from a state of real ignorance and confusion to a state of no more ignorance and no more confusion. Of course, the biggest problem is that we don't know how confused and ignorant we are. It does not dawn on most of us that we are confused or ignorant. And when we hear Dharma teachings, we might think, well, how arrogant of them to assume that I am ignorant. And, that's a difficult situation to be in, because you would have to spend enough time around meditators, or especially accomplished meditators, to get a glimpse of what someone who is free from confusion and is free of ignorance is like. When you do get that glimpse, you can't unsee that. You realize that you really are a monkey. And that's just how it is. If you really want to inherit the capacity of wisdom and understanding that a human being can have, you're going to have to do something about it. And when you look around at what the easily available things to do in your world are any of them about that? Well, let me just say, having grown up in the West and having lived more than half my life and kept my eyes open, the answer is no. No, the West does not have a way of waking up. The West is not even aware of the reality of waking up. You have neuroscientists who are preoccupying themselves with what they call the hard problem of consciousness, which is consciousness isn't a problem. It's not a hard problem. The problem is consciousness that doesn't know itself, that then projects a world that it takes to be real. That's the problem, not the problem that we can't figure out what consciousness is. We are consciousness. We are not going to figure out what consciousness is when we look at it as something other or as a problem to solve. But we don't really have that understanding or even that point of view in the West, at least not yet. But we will. The West is now taking more and more interest in meditation teachings and authentic traditions. And bit by bit, people are opening their minds to maybe there is something about ourselves that we're not even on a path to understand. Maybe we're going to have to borrow the knowledge and guidance of other systems of knowledge that were not developed here. And anyway, if you're going to do that, you might as well go for the best, and that would be meditation. So meditation is the way to bring about the understanding of the Dharma teachings in our life, not as belief, but as experience. And that isn't the easiest thing to do, because when we start hearing Dharma teachings, we find that we can't really make heads or tails of them. They're telling us that the world is a certain way that we don't think the world is. We think the world is a different way than what the Dharma teachings are saying. This is a bit of a challenge for us. Plenty of people walk away at that point, and they just never know whether there was anything behind that door. But not everyone walks away. Some people are intrigued at the bold statements about reality that the Dharma puts forward. For example, the earliest things that we are invited to explore is the notion of impermanence. Now, to some extent, we all know that the world is impermanent. Things change. One person is in power for a period of time, and then they either die or leave power, and then somebody else comes into power, and the world changes under the yoke of their power. The weather changes. We change as we age. We all sort of know that, but it's deeper than that. The teachings of impermanence go all the way down to the subtle moment-by-moment layer of experience. This very moment right now is already over. And this moment is already over. And when it's over, it doesn't go off to the side somewhere. It's gone. And the next moment is here. Now that sounds like a piece of information that you can go, well, let's see, I'm not really sure if I agree with that. But the Dharma isn't about agreeing with an idea. That would make it just a system of information putting an argument forward. The Dharma is telling you this is how things are. And then here are some methods you can use to get close enough to the moment so that you can see for yourself whether or not that is the case. And if you find that it is the case, that things are dissolving moment by moment, maybe you'll now be interested in some of the deeper things that come after that. And that is how people move into the practice of meditation. They hear a bold claim, they investigate it for themselves, they see what it's pointing to, and they have a moment of, oh my God. Then they want more. What else is there? And there's a lot. But the challenge is that all of the Dharma, all of the teachings of Dharma, go against the habitual understanding that we have about the world. One teacher said, the thing about Dharma teachings is they go against the grain of ego. So when you hear the Dharma, it does not confirm your beliefs about reality. When you hear the Dharma, you do not agree with the Dharma right away. You might think you do, like, oh, I completely see that, but you'll have to see how deep your conviction in that is, and you'll do that through meditation. Meditation will bring you into the experience that is being presented by the Dharma, because the Dharma isn't a collection of knowledge that we hold in our mind and remember. It's more like a map, like a Rand McNally road atlas, where we see, oh, okay, if I take this road, then I can get to Crater Lake. Take me about a day and a half. If I take this road, it's going to take 3 days, but either of them will get me to Crater Lake. I'm not sure I believe that there is a Crater Lake. Well, there's only one way for us to know, obviously. We get in our vehicle and we take one of those routes, probably the shorter one, and we arrive and see for ourselves. Is there a Crater Lake? Well, once we've made that trip a few times, we probably don't need the atlas anymore. We have the living experience and we understand what's called the path, the way there. The path isn't a bunch of ideas contained in books. It's something that we understand through experience and that we can return to with confidence. The books, the teachings, the ideas, as outrageous as they are just stepping stones for the experiences. But it's very unlikely that we will have these experiences without those stepping stones. People might want to think that they're going to be exceptional and they're just going to understand this stuff by hearing it once. But I've never met anyone in my entire life as a meditator or a meditation teacher who's successfully done that. Although I have met many people who thought they would, and I was one of those people. I thought for sure that just reading some of the profound teachings of some of the non-dual Advaita Vedanta teachers that I was reading in the 90s, that would be enough. Oh, understanding that there is no self and to just rest in that, I thought that should be enough. And what I found over the years is that it was a little bit hit or miss. Sometimes I was, in fact, understanding the actual state that those teachings were pointed to, but at other times I was just off to the side, not experiencing authentically what those teachings were pointing to, and I didn't know the difference. So how much time did I spend in my early adventures actually resting in the natural state as pointed out by someone like Ramana Maharishi or Nisargadatta or any of those people? How much time? Well, I don't know. Not as much as I thought. Once I was trained in actual meditation with a whole context of knowledge and a progressive path, I was going along the same journey as I was earlier with the non-dual teachings, but now I understood step by step what I was doing, and I could assess whether or not I was in fact resting in the natural state or whether I was resting in something that seemed like the natural state. Because if you rest in something that is like the thing but not the thing, nothing happens. Unless you take that to be real, then something does happen. You become deluded. You think you're doing what all of those great non-dual teachers did, but that's only because you can't see that you've made an error. And what do you lose? You lose time. This journey, once you get a sense for it, is magnificent. I think most people who really step onto this journey and taste it put everything else in their life kind of down a tier. This is the meaning of life. This is the thing they want to do. And it's not something that can be done quickly. You can make tremendous progress in a year or 2 years or 3 years, but if you had 500 years ahead of you of unbroken practice, you'd still have more depth available to you. It's just fathomless, which is what makes some of the remarkable teachers of history, particularly the Buddha or Milarepa or Longchenpa or any of these amazing people, it's just incredible how far they were able to go through their practice. So we need to solve this problem by saturating ourselves with this understanding so that our mindfulness can begin to hold a different view of reality and keep it booted up. So if we hear, for example, that everything that we're experiencing is arising and dissolving, that's different than the way people go through their lives. Even someone who thinks that they're going through their life knowing that everything is impermanent may or may not actually have tasted the reality of that experience. Instead, they have an idea, and that idea isn't very powerful. To have the experience and then to have the understanding available to you means that when you're experiencing it, you don't need the understanding. But then when you get up from your meditation and you begin to plan your day, you're no longer going to be in the experience, whether it's impermanence or non-self or non-duality or emptiness, luminosity or Mahamudra or any of the deeper stages of meditation. You're going to be able to experience that in meditation, and then when you rise from meditation, you're not going to have the protective situation that the meditation posture and sessions hey Leah, provides for you. So you're going to get up from your meditation and immediately your mind is going to go into a conceptual interpretation of what you're seeing. The question is, what is that conceptual interpretation that you're seeing? If you've been raised in the West, it's materialism. Maybe you've been raised in the West and you've been deeply involved in some type of theistic religion. Now, if that's the case, you're probably not listening to this talk. Those communities don't really, they don't seem to take interest in Buddhist meditation or Advaita Vedanta. So you probably aren't here, and I probably don't have to say anything. But if you are just raised, you go through the school system, you get your high school degree, maybe you go to college, work a job, have a family, you're swimming in a world that has the view of materialism. Materialism, maybe we'll have another talk about that at some point, but materialism, what it does is it assumes that there is a world out there that exists from its own side. So I'm looking at a camera. A materialistic view would say there is a camera, it is out there, and it is real. And of course, that sounds so logical, it's sensible. We all believe that, but there is another vision of reality that we could swap that out, which wouldn't just be a different belief. It would begin to change our perceptions of the world we're seeing. And the Dharma, that's what supplies this view, helps us understand why that's happening and what is happening. The Dharma presents a view that we can practice seeing. We can begin to see the world with effort, with mindfulness, according to what the Dharma tells us it is like. And we do that only until we can actually see that way. And then we don't really need the Dharma. Now, if the Dharma were telling us something that weren't true, then we would try and try and try, but we would never really see it. We might try to imagine it. We might have some kind of fantasy of, oh, I see that things are just the way the sacred book said. But that's a different type of experience. In Dharma, we're talking about reality, the very thing that we're experiencing right now, and we hear about how reality actually is and how it is experienced to an unconfused mind. And we look at our experience and we think, well, that's not how I'm experiencing it. Does that mean that I have a confused mind? And the answer is, well, yeah, that probably is the situation. So if you want to see things accurately, try these meditations and meditate according to the understanding that the Dharma has provided. So there really are two components that have to operate together. We have a way of training our mind and our intelligence, and then we have a context or a map that we're training it into. And these things converge at what's called a direct experience. Direct experience is when we have a, oh my God, moment. And we see all on our own without needing to consult a book or a teaching or anything, and for a little while at least, not even needing to continue the meditation. We've arrived at a natural state of insight, and it holds us. We experience and integrate into ourselves, this is real. But it doesn't last. That's the challenge. It opens up and then it closes back down because our habits and our accumulated confusion tends to bring us back toward the way we've always seen things. That means that we have to keep doing it over and over again. It's just like that. In order to wake up, we wake up in glimpses. And in order to even get glimpses, we have to aim ourselves in the right direction, which is what the Dharma helps us do, and then apply ourselves to move in that direction, which is what the meditation does. The meditation without the direction is just going for a joyride. And the knowledge without the meditation doesn't do anything. It just remains as a set of ideas. So the way that the tradition tells us the journey is going to go is that we are going to have to follow a three-tiered approach. First, we're going to have to hear about reality. We're going to have to hear how things are. So the first three big insights that the ancient tradition, which is still the basis of all modern traditions, but it's one of the earliest teachings that comes from this tradition, is that the world and everything in it, all of these things, all of these experiences, everything is impermanent, which means it doesn't last, not even for a moment. It is instantaneous nowness. It is experienceable, but our ideas of what it is are pure fantasy. The second thing is that when we try to grasp after an impermanent world, only one thing can happen, and that is we increase our pain. Often this is called suffering. So the first insight we have is that everything is impermanent. The second insight we have, insight, not belief, the second insight is that when we try to manipulate things, we increase the interference or the roughness of our life. We suffer because of it. When we let go of trying to manipulate, things even out. And that's counterintuitive. Normally, we think that if we manipulate the world in a certain way, that we will be happy, or at least we'll be able to get away from painful situations. And while to some extent that's obviously true, you have to manipulate the world enough to get food in your mouth or to get medicine in your body or to get a job to pay your bills. That is not under, no one is arguing against that. But at a subtler level, we understand that the outcome of manipulating the world is a fundamental insecurity that just continues. It just continues. The third insight, after impermanence and suffering, is that this mind of ours that is so intimate to us seems to have a headquarters within it. called me. It has self. We deeply believe that this self is real. In fact, it seems crazy to even question it. But the Dharma says, well, you better question it, because that's the biggest delusion that you have. You've never had a self. There is nothing within you or anywhere else that can actually be located as me. And all of the suffering in our life comes from trying to secure or protect or enrich this me. When you meet great accomplished meditators, what you're meeting is someone who has seen through the illusion of self and has just become relaxed. They're still there. You can toss them a ball and they'll catch it and toss it back. They might even be able to tell you how to cook a chicken. They might be able to maybe tell you how to invest your money. But there's something that they've understood about themselves, which comes through a certain journey. And if we want to go on that journey, we have to understand that it involves taking knowledge in and then directing ourselves to see or test that for ourselves through meditation. Now, the problem that we have is that this knowledge is scarce in our world. We don't have the traditional context that supports and supplies that knowledge. That traditional context is called the Sangha. The Sangha, the gathering of practitioners who share the journey and who are all learning to work with the map. We, if we are interested in meditation, are probably one of the very few people we know who would ever explore this alternate map of reality. And the alternate map of reality in our culture is so bizarre that it's hard for us to take it seriously if we don't have support from other people. We have to share our life with other people who understand the Dharma. If we're just one person trying to do it without any support, it's very unlikely that that will succeed. You could think of this as trying to learn a language, but not being around any speakers of that language. And you could compare that to trying to learn a language and moving to the culture that speaks that language. If I wanted to learn French, I would be best served by moving someplace where everyone speaks French. There was a time in my life where I wanted to learn ancient Greek, Attic Greek. And at the same time, I also wanted to learn Sanskrit. And I learned that these are no longer spoken languages. These are only literary languages because the tradition of speaking them died out a long time ago. I learned that there is a society in my hometown in Illinois, around the University of Illinois, of people who do try to speak Sanskrit. There are a bunch of professors all over the world that come together for these Sanskrit conferences, but it's pretty rare. I think the point here is that Dharma, the context, the knowledge that informs meditation, it's like a language that begins to open up a vision of human life. And you have to get fluent in it. That's how your meditation becomes a vehicle of this journey, of the journey to awakening. Otherwise, your meditation is like someone kind of maybe making up a language and speaking it on their own and not able to find anyone who can understand them. Or someone who tries to speak a language that they've never heard spoken and the pronunciation is off. Like every time I try to ask a question of one of my Tibetan teachers, I don't speak Tibetan, but I have a big vocabulary of Tibetan words. That's the way a lot of us are. I know a lot of Tibetan. I know what the important terms are and even some of the phrases. And so sometimes I want to ask a teacher about something, and I might, say the word dekonyi, thinking that they're going to understand what I meant. It just means thatness or suchness. It's a meditative term of experience. No matter how many times I say it to them, they just look at me like, what is this guy saying? What is this guy saying? Even the translators are listening to me going, what word are you saying? So when I write it out, they look at it and they realize the problem was your pronunciation. No one's going to understand it. And then they say it correctly to the teacher, and the teacher understands right away. I had the words, at least I thought I did, but I wasn't able to use them in a way that was meaningful. And that comes from me not knowing how to speak that language. If we are meditators and we have no support of hearing and understanding the Dharma in our life, that's the first thing we need to correct, because we're wasting our time. I mean, even though the desire to meditate may be there and the longing for liberation may be there, those are so important. But the best thing that we can do for those is to put them in an environment where they can flourish. And that environment looks like other people who understand the same thing, that can help us with our meditation, that we can compare notes. When you enter into a community of educated meditators, there will be some people that are way up ahead of you on the path, and you'll be trying to get time with them, talking to them, and they'll encourage you, they'll listen to your problems, they'll help you sort things out. Maybe they'll make recommendations of a book you should read or a teacher that you should meet. And there'll also be people who are at your level, and you're all figuring it out together. You're like in a cohort trying to learn some advanced mathematics, and it's exciting. The professors understand the mathematics, and so you know that if you keep at it, you'll understand it too. But you and your friends who get together for coffee before class, you don't understand it all yet. You're learning it together, but that will serve you well. Eventually, you will know that there are other people who truly understand the path you're on, and that some of them are kind of experts in one aspect of it, while others are experts in another aspect of it. We need this culture. We need this community. We need to hear the Dharma again and again, every day if possible. We need to take some of the teachings in every day, because they go against the grain of our materialistic worldview. And if our meditation is going to produce results, it's because the meditative worldview has taken center stage, and now the materialistic worldview is on a second tier. We can pop into it when we need to talk to people who strongly believe in their materialistic worldview. Well, we know that really well. That was our first language. But if our meditation is going to get anywhere, we have to develop this second language, the language of the Dharma. And in order to do that, we have to saturate our system with it and reinforce that by finding friends and teachers who can speak that language to us. Years and years and years ago in graduate school, a teacher was giving a talk. There were two teachers who were co-teaching a class. And one of them was giving a meditation talk on something that I'd been reading about a lot. I was excited because they were talking about a certain type of meditative experience and a certain type of understanding that accompanies it. And I'd been studying this a lot, and I kind of knew what all the smart people, how they talked about it. I wasn't really yet a meditator who could understand this, but I had studied it. Anyway, during the talk, I raised my hand and I started asking questions. And the teacher started giving me a general response. And it's not what I wanted. I actually, there was a specific thing I wanted them to talk about that was not a general topic. It was a little bit more nuanced. And so I just thought, well, I might as well just I might as well use my best understanding. So I began to use technical terms, Sanskrit terms. I referenced places that I'd read it, and the teacher's eyes just lit up like, oh. And then they started just like a fire hose of very nuanced, very sophisticated communication coming back at me. And I was excited, and I looked to some of my friends. I was friends with the other graduate students, and a few of them were looking at me like, "What are you guys talking about? What happened in this conversation here?" And that puzzled me. I thought we'd all be excited. Afterwards, I just hung around. I was waiting to talk to that teacher, but the other teacher came up to me and said, "That was a very interesting exchange, Jeffrey." And I said, "Yeah, I can't really understand what happened because, my buddy to my right just seemed to be lost." And he said, "Don't you know what was going on there?" And I said, "No." And this person said, "You were speaking shorthand to the professor, and the professor was speaking shorthand back. You must have been studying." And that was the first experience I had of a tiny little bit of my fluency tapping in to the very well-developed fluency of a teacher. And they were able to elevate my understanding because I was ready for it. Well, I think that experiences like that are what nourish us. And we have those experiences when we care enough about bringing in the knowledge of this new worldview and holding it within our life. Not just letting it go, not just sort of taking a little bit in and then letting it dissolve as we go back to our default materialistic worldview. We need to speak the language. We need to find a context in which the language is spoken, and we need to eat that food every day. The Dharma is like medicine that we take in that clears up our confusion about who we are and what life is. Then, when that is cleared up and we are less confused and less ignorant, we continue to consume the Dharma. Then it becomes like nutrition. So at first it's like medicine, and then it's like nutrition. And just like food, we have to take it every day. We don't once in a while take it. We take it in and we metabolize it. It becomes part of us. And at some point, we will know that the view of waking up, the Dharma, has taken root in us because we will be able to hear things from a materialistic perspective, but we will also be able to hear things from a Dharma perspective. And the longer we do this in our life, we will be able to translate in real time. We'll understand both languages, and we will probably always hold to the Dharma perspective because it will prove itself to us. We'll see that this is the language of the mind that illuminates the experience of living and dying. So I think that finding friends, finding support, finding something that is ongoing is the critical element to making sure that our path pays off. And I wanted to close with that. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that for those of you who are looking for a way to plug in and to begin to have these conversations, please consider our Summer Academy. It's happening in 2 weeks. I think it's 9 days or 8 days of practice and teaching and discussion. We do it every summer. This is our 4th year. You can go to findinggroundmeditation.com to read the details. Or you could just come back here in this coming Thursday when I'm going to be presenting about it. But that's my pitch for that. So thank you all. We have 4 minutes left. If anybody has a question, please type it in. And if no one has a question, we'll just go. Thank you, Eileen. All right. Oh, yes. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for showing up. If you're catching this on the replay, tune into one of our next ones and be sure to bring any questions you have. Just type them in at the beginning of the session and I'll see them right away and I'll make sure that I respond to them. But we'll be back on Thursday. So see you then.